also contemplates the possibility of both allowing cannabis imports from other states or other countries, something that's strictly prohibited under current federal law. It would also prohibit regulators from importing cannabis that is produced somewhere that doesn't accept exports from Pennsylvania. Oregon Governor Kate Brown signed a bill in June that would also provide for cannabis imports and exports across state lines, but it specifies it would only be effective if there was a change in federal policy. Representative Earl Blumenauer and Senator Ron Wyden filed legislation in Congress that same month to provide a pathway for such transactions, but it hasn't been scheduled for any hearings or votes. In a co-sponsorship memo for the Pennsylvania bill that was circulated in June, the Solo emphasized that the harms of marijuana criminalization for individuals caught up in the drug war, as well as the economic toll of enforcing prohibition, meanwhile implementing a legal cannabis market, stands to generate hundreds of millions in tax revenue and thousands of jobs, he said. The bill was referred to the House Judiciary Committee on Monday. It currently has 23 co-sponsors. If passed, the Liquor Control Board would have until July 1st, 2020 to adopt regulations necessary for the implementation of this act. The governor's announcement followed a months-long statewide listening tour on cannabis policy, headed by Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, which found that a strong majority of residents in the state favor legalizing cannabis. This isn't the first time that the U.S. lawmakers have floated the idea of having a state directly control legal cannabis market. Similar legislation was filed in New Mexico and passed the House in March, but it later died in the Senate. A governor-appointed commission ultimately declined to recommend such a model for 2020 legislation earlier this month. America's first cannabis cafe opens. Lowell Cafe, the first fully licensed cannabis cafe in the United States, opened its doors in Western Hollywood this week, inviting patrons to pair a joint with its menu inspired by the flavor profiles of the plant. In harmony with West Hollywood community, the restaurant will offer a first-of-its-kind nightlife experience, a spokeswoman for the cafe told CNN. Lowell Farms, a cannabis cafe, will serve as a welcoming and a safe environment for all to enjoy and learn about consumption in a newly legal world of cannabis. Customers who visit the cafe will be offered tableside flower service from a flower host and will be invited to choose cannabis selection to be smoked on site. Food and drink will also be available. Drummond launched the cooperative Alleviation VIP in 2012, eventually becoming known for creating cannabis and food cuisine for the likes of Wiz Khalifa and Miguel. Due to regulations, however, infused meals are not permitted. Instead, Lowell Cafe will only be offering cannabis products to pair with their menu items. Marijuana arrests rise for the third straight year, outpace arrests for all other violent crimes. According to data released by the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation, the total number of persons arrested in the United States for violating cannabis laws rose for the third consecutive year. According to the FBI's Uniform Crime Report, police made 663,367 arrests for cannabis-related violations in 2018. That total is more than 20% higher than the total number of persons arrested for commission of violent crimes, which was 521,103. Of those arrested for marijuana crimes, 90% were arrested for marijuana possession offenses only, which totaled over 600,000 arrests. Police across America make a marijuana-related arrest every 48 seconds, said NORML Executive Director Eric Altieri. At a time when the overwhelming majority of Americans want cannabis to be legal and regulated, it is an outrage that many police departments across the country continue to waste tax dollars and limited law enforcement resources on arresting otherwise law-abiding citizens for simple marijuana possession. The year-over-year increase in marijuana arrests comes at the same time that several states, including California, have legalized the adult use of cannabis, leading to a significant decline in cannabis-related arrests. And in those jurisdictions, it also marks the reversal of a trend of declining arrests that began following the year 2007, when police made a record 872,721 total marijuana arrests in the United States. Marijuana-related arrests were least likely to occur in the western states, most of which have legalized the substance, but were especially prevalent in the Northeast, where they constituted 53% of all drug arrests. Michigan expands roadside drug testing through the entire state. Starting Tuesday, October 1st, police across Michigan can now conduct oral roadside drug tests that can detect the use of drugs. According to Michigan State Police, one-year pilot program was done.
Welcome, friends, to another edition of Economic Update, a weekly program devoted to the economic dimensions of our lives, jobs, incomes, debts, our own and our children. I'm your host, Richard Wolf. Before jumping into the updates today, I wanted to respond to the large number of you that have sent in emails through
blood tests confirm the presence of THC in 63 cases. While not foolproof, it is enough for MSP to say they have performed well. The data wasn't enough to draw any definitive conclusions, so in February of this year, the committee recommended the pilot expand to all drug recognition experts in the entire state. Over the last several years, Michigan has seen a steady increase in fatal crashes involving drivers impaired by drugs. In 2018, there were 247 drug-involved traffic fatalities. Under the program, a DRE can require drivers to submit to the oral test to detect the presence of a controlled substance. The test can detect the following drugs: amphetamines, cannabis, cocaine, methamphetamines, opiates, and more. If you refuse to submit, you can be arrested. CDC says for the first time that some THC products could be behind vaping deaths and illnesses. For the first time, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said it suspects vaping THC, a compound in cannabis, is tied to hundreds of lung illnesses, and at least 12 deaths have been reported across the country. During a press briefing on Friday, CDC officials said the latest findings of their investigation suggest THC products play a role in the outbreak. Previously, the CDC reported that many of the sick people report using THC in their vape pens, but officials stopped short of tying the illness to the drug. In data collected from more than 500 patients, 77 reported using THC products or using both THC and nicotine. About 36 reported using only products with THC. The CDC said 16% of the patients said they only vape nicotine and not THC. This information is based on self-reports from the patients. We are in the midst of a complex investigation that spans nearly all states and involves serious life-threatening disease in young people, Dr. Ann Schuchat, the principal deputy director of the CDC, said at the briefing. There are 805 confirmed and probable cases of lung injury tied to vaping, according to the CDC. The CDC has also reported 12 deaths tied to vaping, but it expects that number to rise as state and local officials report these kinds of deaths to the CDC. The Associated Press counted 13 vaping deaths so far. Though the CDC has found a pattern with THC, officials said that they are unable to say what exactly is making people sick. We can unfortunately not identify one product, brand, source, or device as common across all patients, Dr. Jennifer Layden, Illinois' Chief Medical Officer and State, said at the briefing. The CDC continues to suggest that people consider not using e-cigarettes at all, especially ones that contain THC. And that's it for your local and national Canadian news for October 4th, 2019.
All right, guys, and now we are back. We leave that last little news article for a reason. Basically, because we're talking about these vape issues that are going on in this country. Here on the show, we've been discussing these vaping issues for a long time now. It seems like probably before this whole outbreak kind of broke out, where, we had the glycol issues, we've had MCT oil issues, we've had quality issues, and now there's this new trend that seems to be happening all over the country right now, where people are getting sick, people are dying, which is fathoming, right? Because, now, we talk about how safe cannabis is, and we've talked about how safe cannabis is and how no one's died from it. So now, the CDC seems to be releasing something out every single day that's a little contradictory to the day before, where, the death tolls are rising. One day it's this, one day it's that, one day they don't know. So we have Dr. Mary Clifton coming on today, who is the author of The Grass is Greener, brand new book that just came out. Talks about medical marijuana and a bunch of other books as well. So we're going to let Mary get on the phone with us here, talk to us about what she's doing, where she's been, and the fight that she's fighting right now. Mary, how you doing today?
Really, really good. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's our honor to have you on the show, as always. We try to educate people on cannabis, the rights, the wrongs. Not everything out there we read every day is 100% accurate, whether it's pro or against. You know what I mean? So
absolutely.
It's important to educate our listeners, and for our listeners to take a minute out of their lives, especially with this epidemic, right? Because, it's considered an epidemic now, isn't it?
an epidemic in terms of the concerns surrounding vaping. Yeah, recognizing that millions of people are vaping, and the number of people who have been sickened by the vapes is 1,000. So, there's at this point, our numbers have gotten up to 1,000 with 15 people who have a death linked to vaping. So, so still a lot of people who are not impacted by it, but enough that we need to figure out what's going on.
Right. Now, what is going on? I mean, me and Brandon talk about this quite a bit, and all the different aspects of it. I mean, to us, there's a bunch of different things, but why all of a sudden where's this spike come from?
Hang on, wait, a little add-on to that, too. How come it's not happening in Canada as well?
Right. I think that there's different levels of regulation in different countries around the world. I mean, the UK has only seen one, now potentially two people who have gotten sick from vaping compared to our numbers here in the U.S. And, quite likely it's a result of a lack of regulation and some products that are going into the vaping pens that you're not seeing in other parts of the world.
Now, do you think it's we've talked about it a few times. We talk about the quality of products, and as in everything in life, typically the cheapest thing isn't always the best thing, correct? You know what I mean? Like, if it's too good to be true, it usually is. And we were seeing these carts hit the market for cheap prices, and everybody's jumping on them. Everybody feels like they're getting something out of these carts. Some people even like some of these carts. I've talked to a couple people that really, the dank, I guess you could say the dank carts are the number one most talked about cart out there. And I know plenty of people that would love to go buy a $20 dank cart tomorrow, which is kind of scary. Now, so the whole industry, I don't think a lot of people realize this. I mean, we talk about a lot of the cannabis industry is a non-regulated industry right now. So it really has to fall into you trust in the company that apparently who's on your packaging. But as we discussed before, me and Brandon have, and it's well known by this point that half these cartridges that you see in the streets, you can go to Amazon and buy the packaging for, correct?
Oh, well, I'm not really, I'm a doctor. I'm aware of how this is impacting health negatively, but I don't really know how a secondary economy is putting these products together.
Right. Well, I mean, this is what we've seen is, and as the reports come out, a lot of these cart packages, are easily accessible via online, whether it's Amazon or whatever website that these people can find these carts on. So with that being said, obviously anybody can put anything within a cart, right? So with no testing, no regulations, and obviously the FDA, is not involved with any sort of oversight on this, you can pretty much get whatever's out there, right? Now with this vaping crisis, like you said, you're the doctor side of things, right? What are we seeing as far as effects of these issues right now, as far as lung effects?
Well, what we're seeing in the, with these people who have been getting sick is mostly a lipoid pneumonia, which is a pneumonia where a lot of fatty deposits collect in the lungs, and then that's very difficult for the lungs' natural responses to control inflammation. It's very difficult for the lungs to handle that. It's not typical or common for fat to be present in the lung tissue, and so all of the usual things that the body is used to managing, like a little bit of dust that may have gotten in from taking a breath that didn't get properly of some dirty air. Your body can manage that, but these fatty accumulations are difficult for your body to handle. And we're not really sure exactly if that's because the vaping product is being delivered in an oil and the oil itself is accumulating, or if it's, just a result of the particular type of inflammation. Sometimes certain cancers, for example, will get a little calcium in them. They'll get hard and calcified and very, like rock hard, and other types of cancer will get necrotic and die in the middle. So we don't know exactly why it's creating all these fatty accumulations in the lungs, but that appears to be what's happening for people who are getting sick with these vape-related diseases.
Now, when you say fats in lungs, the first thing that comes to my head is like MCT oil, right?
Me too.
So, I mean, it seems to me like MCT oil's been involved with carts a little bit. It seemed like, and tell me if I'm wrong on this whole theory that I have here. Obviously we had glycol issues before, right? And it kind of started out with the e-cigarette movement, right? When everybody started to do the vapes for the cigarette-based vapes, right? And then we found out they're giving people popcorn lung, correct? And then they kind of kicked it out of the whole cigarette market, the whole vape market, right? So then it kind of became a black market item. We have all this glycol. Hey, we can put them in vape carts, right? Then it seemed like 8 months ago we had this huge PG kind of VG, all these warnings where everyone's like, whoa, let's pay attention to this so we don't get popcorn lung, right?
Well, the vape products came to the U.S. Initially to help people with stopping smoking. When they approached our regulatory agencies, they approached them with the idea that the vapes would help people stop smoking, and in fact, with all of the fruity flavors and cocktail flavors, it's probably promoted more tobacco use than it has actually helped people to stop.
Oh, definitely.
But when they brought it into the United States, they were comparing vapes to the known health hazard of smoking tobacco cigarettes. So in terms of your risks with carbonyls or formaldehyde exposure, a lot of those exposures are equivalent. The exposures that are different with vaping products are the propylene glycol and the vegetable glycerin that we're using as vehicles, as thinners for the nicotine or for the THC and CBD. And then also the flavorings. So the propylene glycol, when it heats, and heating a product is somewhat like breaking a glass. You know the glass is going to break, but you don't know exactly how it's going to break or how big the pieces are going to be until it breaks. So we know that when we heat propylene glycol, we get carbonyls, and can't generally tell you how many. You don't want any more carbonyls in your system than you've already got, but it's not probably any worse than what you're getting from tobacco smoke from a cigarette. But when you heat vegetable glycerin, that is another sugar. And sugars, when they break down into formaldehyde and acetaldehyde and acrylamide. And those are all present in tobacco too, probably in similar concentrations. The big risk with vaping appears to be the flavoring, especially the diacetyl, which is present in most studies in 60% or more of vaping supplies. So people who get this diacetyl exposure end up getting, there's known occupational risk for people who are working with diacetyl. It's a flavoring, and you can use it in food, but that doesn't mean you can ingest it, And so the ingestion, or it doesn't mean you can smoke it. It means it's safe as a food, but it's not necessarily safe to inhale. And people who work with diacetyl do have a risk where it can take healthy lungs and turn them into permanently damaged lungs just from occupational exposure. So we know that has a significant risk, and unfortunately that's in a lot of the vaping products that are on the market. It just wasn't effectively regulated right from the start.
Right, and then also we have that problem, but we also don't we have a small problem with even the quality of carts that we've seen between like seeping metals? I was on a call this morning with Dr. Uma, and Dr. Uma, she had called me to express her concern with this issue too, right? Talk to me about it because Dr. Uma's big thing is about metals, right? And where the metals are coming from. It seemed like she, with her, a lot of this reactionary things that are happening lately have seen because they're seeing huge spikes in metals now. I don't know how familiar you are with like the testing and stuff like that, but now are these metals coming from, inferior products that we're not used to seeing in our market? Like, because people are just trying to, get that green, get that dollar, get that, as fast as we can process that cannabis, right? And then, go for the biggest buds. So now everybody is throwing tons of nutrients and products at these plants that aren't necessarily the best thing you want to be smoking. Or is it, I think me and Brandon discussed this about a month ago where, a lot of things that scares me right now is I hear a lot of the word cyanide, right? And one of the reports that me and Brandon talked about a few months ago were that, the vape coils, like the metals they use in these coils, when they heat up, they're actually giving off these cyanides, So do you think it's more of an issue with the quality of the material? Or do you think it's an issue with the quality of the packaging or the cart itself?
I would argue it's probably the quality of the cartridge itself. The cannabis plant is not particularly effective. I mean, I'm sure you've seen reports about arsenic being concentrated in rice or chicken being very effective in concentrating arsenic in its meat and in its fat. Different plants are more effective than others at concentrating different metals or different nutrients. Like potassium concentrates really well in dark green leafy vegetables, especially beet greens. But I'm not under the impression that any cannabis plant is particularly effective at concentration of heavy metals. I think most of what we're dealing with these heavy metal exposures might be contamination of the soil or the cartridge, and I'm sure that the majority of these products that are on the market are not undergoing third-party testing. This market exploded, and I think is potentially, if I'm remembering right, the fastest-growing market that Silicon Valley has ever seen. It grew so fast that I think the regulation was just completely lacking. And perhaps in part that's why it grew so fast, because they were able to get around the regulation for at least this initial period of time. It'll probably be their undoing, unfortunately, or fortunately, if you're not behaving in a high integrity way.
Right. I mean, it's kind of scary. I mean, there are some companies out there that provide a clean oil, but then again, we're worried about these oils, right? When we're testing these oils that are being put on the box, if it's the proper test and the proper everything they're supposed to be doing, right? They're just testing the oil before it goes into the cart, right?
Right.
And 90% of these tests, right, are just for THC and cannabinoid profiles, so they're not really testing for metals and pesticides and things like that. We discuss this a lot on the show because, unfortunately, with this industry, what we've seen a lot is the people that really care about their products and want to test and get the right test done because they're working with patients or they have, their interest lies in patient care or medicine, right? It's like $600 to test a product to get all these answers back, right? So if you're a small farmer or you're a small craft person or you're just a small edible company, that $500-$600 is a huge hit to a small batch of something as you're trying to test it, right? So and then also we've seen issues where third-party testing isn't always it can be skewed, you know what I mean? There's ways that people know how to skew a test, you know what I mean, which we could discuss, but we're not going to let anybody know how you can do that because it's just not right. And there's ways that, money takes care of things, so, we've seen and talked about reports where hemp's been hot and it's gotten passed, you know what I mean, where things weren't quite within range and they get passed, so... With all this testing, so here comes my next question, though. This is going to be an interesting one before we take a break here real quick. Is the whole industry being really scrutinized right now? Because, I sit back and I go, okay, we've had a number of deaths, which I agree, nobody wants to have any deaths, especially in our industry, and it should be a concern, right? But when I look back and I think of, even just e-cigarettes, how many deaths were caused by e-cigarettes where I can still go into Massachusetts today and go buy an e-cigarette cart or a Juul or something of that nature? Most places they pull them out, but, they're still readily available. Why are we just focusing on the THC side of things?
Well, I think that in large part that's probably being driven by media, so that we can impact the industry in the way that people want to impact the industry. And it might be that it's a lot easier to get a hold of a tobacco vape that's being at least a little bit better produced and in a primary market, whereas more THC vapes are being made available on a secondary market. So it could be that these black market vapes are obviously under a lot less regulation, even more so than the regular vapes are. All the way around, avoiding the propylene glycol and avoiding the vegetable glycerin is wise, but definitely these flavored vapes have got to go. They've got to go.
Well, let me ask you another quick question. I mean, the flavored vapes, obviously, we discussed the issue as well, where people talk about terpenes, right? Where there's plant-derived terpenes, there's cannabis plant-derived terpenes, and there's just what they call naturally derived terpenes. So, and when your Fruity Pebbles taste like the Fruity Pebbles in a box of cereal, that's probably not a natural plant terpene. So, and what's in that terpene? You know what I mean? Like, these wedding cakes, these things that literally taste like they just came, like, well, I've tried those before, Fruity Pebbles, and I was blown away because it literally tasted like the sugar at the bottom of the Fruity Pebbles, you know what I mean? Which, and that's my concern as well, because, again, we talk about the vaping issue as, we talked about it, and you brought it up earlier, and I thank you for doing that, because a lot of people don't realize how vapes came to tuition, right? Because they were here to get people to stop smoking cigarettes, right? And now it's created its own industry, which is almost as big, if not bigger, than cigarettes right now, because it's convenient, it's easy, there's no smells. I can go in the movie theater, we can go all over the place, and we can just vape out of our carts, and that's kind of like a trendy thing at this point, So it's just... It's amazing how we've seen this whole industry kind of blow up on itself to be something it never wanted to be, But within that, though, there's regulations. And guys, when we come back from our quick break, we're going to have Brendan Barberio do the strain of the week. We're going to talk a little bit more about the vaping issue, things that you need to look for if you decide to continue to vape, and should you decide to hold off. Is there enough warning out there to take your health a little bit more serious and say, I need to take a break from vaping? Guys, don't go anywhere. This is WGDR Plainfield, WGDH Hardwick. You are tuned in right now to In the Weeds Prohibition Talk Radio with Joseph Smith and Brendan Barberio, and we're going to go right to the strain of the week, brought to you by Brendan Barberio.
Brendan Barberio, your cannabis expert for the Weeds Prohibition Talk Radio on WGDR. This week's strain of the week is the Mother's Helper. The Mother's Helper is a hybrid strain of intense 22% THC level that really gives you a helping hand. This potent cross of the Chocolate and the Northern Lights #1 combines best of both worlds, pulling in the delicious chocolate taste from the Chocolate as well as the energy from the Northern Lights. Smoking moderate amounts of Mother's Helper will lead you into a smooth high with mental clarity and focus with an increased sense of euphoria. This medication is ideal for treating individuals who suffer from attention deficit disorder, as well as others that may suffer from severe migraine headaches. This dank strain is a favorite of vapor users traditionally, and with novices, it has become aware that you should not smoke too much. It will make you a little bit of jittery and anxious. It is recommended smoking Mother's Helper regularly to balance you with the indica effects that will take control and actually guide you through the rest of your day and balance you from anything becoming overwhelming. The Mother's Helper's nug is fluffy and hairy with blue undertones and, of course, a delicious covering of white crystals. Once again, I'm Brendan Barberio, your cannabis expert for In the Weeds Prohibition Talk Radio on WGDR.
All right, we are back. One thing I want to talk about really quick, because, a lot of you guys know and you reach out to us and you communicate with us through Facebook. It seems like I've had nothing but a slew of calls this morning about Facebook not working for a lot of people. A lot of accounts closed off today. I don't know what's going on. They keep trying to tell everybody that they're not messing with Facebook businesses, or Instagram is not messing with Facebook businesses, but it seems like there's a lot of issues going on, guys. So just want to give everybody a little heads up. Be safe with your pages out there. It's been quite a week. Oh my God, I don't know if it's the hot button topic. I don't know if it's everything show related, or just this show itself. But
well, let's get on a little fluffier side for a second, right? So let me give you a little background on this whole little Mother's Helper thing. We picked this because it really deals with a high rate of like ADD and ADHD. And so the story goes that if you are using this cannabis in a low form and extracting the CBD from it, supposedly it's great for that. And that's where the whole Mother's Helper thing kind of comes from.
Which is great. I mean, it's unique when we do our strains of the week because a lot of people don't realize out there that, it's not a funny thing. We talk about for medical benefits and ways that you guys can understand what strains work and how strains work for your own beneficial health. I'm sure Dr. Mary can, help us describe this as well. All these certain strains have different effects. That's why we have indica, sativas, hybrids, these different things are out there in the world. And then, when we get to the vape cart issue, because as most of you guys know, I'm not a big vape cart fan, personally here. Why? Because it's not medicine to me, right? Because the whole process of getting that extraction into that cartridge, you lose a lot of cannabinoids, right? And then you're kind of like, you're stripping things out to reintroduce things, and then we're at where we're at now, where people are getting sick, people are not doing their due diligence. As a chef, Dr. Mary hit it on the head earlier. Oils, man, like your lungs are not designed to have oils or fats in them. So when we talk about MCT oils, where there's these oils that are safe for consumption in other methods, but not necessarily ingesting or especially burning. There's as a chef, that olive oil, for instance, has a really low burn point. So if you saute with olive oil, which most people know, it doesn't work because you burn the oil. You know what I mean? And you get that flavor. So there's all these extenuating issues with vape carts right now. What do we do? I mean, there's a huge market of people out there that are relying on vape carts for their medicine, right? We're seeing a huge response from Massachusetts, where these companies are starting to sue the state. These associations are starting to put in issues with the state, suing the state about the ban of vape carts. The best question is, are they safe, doctor? And overall, as we look at it, is it something that's safe to still consume, or should these people be looking for other alternatives? Like, we love the live fresh press stuff because of the cannabinoid values to it, right? What should people be doing right now?
Well, I'm a whole bud girl too, I have to say. I mean, my whole experience throughout my career has been whole foods and managing disease using, if you're going to be managing disease in a natural way, using whole natural products, because they are balanced and appear to be very effective, oftentimes the most effective when you, for example, eat an apple instead of taking a vitamin C pill. You get all of the benefits of the whole food as opposed to just thinking that you're getting benefit from taking that vitamin. Right. But that said, there are situations when you're using cannabis medicinally where you can concentrate a particular cannabinoid and get a higher level of inflammation or an improved level of sedation that in some situations is going to be really important to try to get. So some of these products that are a little bit more synthetic, I'm excited about the work that's being done in Israel, particularly, but also all over the world. There's a lot of people creating very interesting and valuable products in a number of labs all over the world. So I think we can look forward to some of that stuff. The vaping issue, in my mind, is, and after my research, really seems to be related to the flavorings and to the vehicles that you're using to carry the CBD or THC. I mean, clearly it's not that big of a deal to inhale CBD or THC, and it appears to be, anti-inflammatory in a lot of cases. The information that we have where we think of it as inflammatory, is when we compare it to smoking cigarettes. But if you look at a tobacco smoker, they're smoking perhaps a pack a day. They're going to be inhaling smoke 400 times a day,
right?
With one pack of cigarettes. So if you're trying to compare that to somebody who's vaping, who's doing or who's smoking THC or CBD, they might be taking 8 inhalations on a big day. So it's just completely incomparable to look at those two different groups and try to draw any conclusions between the two of them. Right. And when we really try to show risk with vaping, or with smoking cannabis, with just that exposure, and you remove the tobacco, boy, it's pretty hard to show that it creates a lot of damage in the lung.
Right. I mean, and like you said, a lot of these a lot of people have been smoking for a while. You know what I mean? It's not like thousands of people just picked up a vape pen a month ago and realized that they can't handle it or it's going to affect them in a certain way.
Right.
So it's like you said, there's things that have been well tested. You know what I mean? So a lot of it is just, even if you guys find a quality product, you got to be careful with what they're putting it in, how they're getting it to you, how you're consuming it. I'm a flower guy too. The whole vape thing I never really got into. The fresh press stuff I love because it's that entourage effect that I think most every patient should be looking for. We can isolate a lot of these compounds and a lot of these cannabinoids into, like Dr. Mary said, into their own individual compound, and then we can focus that on. But now, you had said something earlier, and I've read a couple different articles, and I want to bring this up with you, Dr. Mary, just because I've seen a little bit of back and forth on this particular gentleman. You know what I mean? And we've had a doctor come out and we're talking about synthetic compounds, right? I guess the first thing would be is, how do you feel about these synthetic compounds? Like, I mean, we have Epidiolex, and like now, overseas, the EU has approved Epidiolex for child seizures, right? In our country, we're not quite to that point yet, but we have seen some problems with synthetically made medicines, right? How do you feel about these? Is this something that you feel positive about, or is it something that how do you feel from a doctor standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd love to see most patients getting the benefit from whole bud products, I mean, definitely. And I think most people can. But then in certain cases, I was just talking to a patient this morning who has Crohn's disease, and where, a very serious inflammatory bowel disease, intermittent bleeding, lots of diarrhea, considerable abdominal pain, and we're not getting it under control with just whole flower. I mean, I'm really looking forward to the research that's coming out of Israel about
order that, quote, cops saw someone suspicious, approached him, and he opened fire on them, close quote. That was false. Then there were reports that Officer Mulkeen was possibly killed by his own gun in a struggle with Williams. Williams still described as the shooting suspect. Well, we now know that Williams didn't kill anyone. All of the guns that were fired belonged to police, not unlike
form, or if that's not working, different strains or different formulation.
Right. No, definitely. I mean, we're seeing cannabis be effective for autism. We were talking about dementia earlier, where they're doing studies with dementia now, which would be amazing. Imagine if that could help people with dementia. So yes. The whole CBD thing now. I got a question for you now that we have a doctor, it was a doctor. We talk about the CBD bubble, right? It's kind of like this bubble. Everybody talks CBD, but there's a whole slew of other cannabinoids that are very valuable in using for medical uses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely. There's the CBN and CBG, CBC. There's, I've heard numbers as high as 800 different cannabinoids, but there's certainly 100 that have been identified. And, where further research is looking at different ways to position them. And, the research around just brain health is amazing, because there's so many people who have inflammation in their brain, but also have degenerative diseases of the brain like Alzheimer's that are really, really suffering, and having to giving them some hope, some potential for possible brain regrowth for neurogenesis is so exciting. There's some research coming out of Houston with Dr. Ruan, where they're doing scans and also, doing work sort of like an EKG on a heart. They're doing electrodiagnostics on brains after CBD exposure. And they're also doing imaging, MRIs or scans that look at the volume of the brain. And they're finding that the size of the brain is increasing, which is something we have never been able to do before. So it appears to happen relatively quickly. So there's some very good preliminary data coming out of more than one laboratory suggesting that we could help to promote neurogenesis, new brain growth with CBD. That's amazing. But every laboratory that is doing these studies is also saying, it's not just a couple drops of CBD. It's a good diet and regular exercise. It's all the things that promote an overall healthy person that can help to reverse the brain disease.
Right, we had Dr. Bob on. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Bob, but he was on the show about a month ago now, and he was, his big thing was the same thing. It was like we have this endocannabinoid system, right? And it's like it makes perfect sense, right? Like if you have 8 things out of whack and do 2 things right, you're not healthy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You could be taking CBD for your pains all day long, but if you're going to McDonald's 3 times a day, it's probably not going to be as effective as it was if you change the diet around, right? And then, we read all the time about how a lot of this is a lot of it's mental, you know what I mean? Like getting your diet changed around, getting yourself mentally healthy is the biggest and the most hardest part, right? And you must deal with you must deal with patients a lot and see this a lot. Where do you see this, CBD affecting people the most right now within your patients?
Oh, I mean, I think the vast majority of people that are getting benefit from cannabinoids or any cannabinoid formulation, CBD as a distillation, or CBD and THC, are getting benefit from insomnia, anxiety, pain. I mean, those are the big concerns of a lot of people, and it's so gratifying because I've been an internist now for almost 25 years. And I've worked in private practice, hospital settings. I've been very full time during that entire time, and there are some things we're very good at helping people with, and other things, not so good. I mean, if you have your appendix rupture, it's a really good idea to go to the hospital or see your doctor. But if you're having trouble sleeping, a lot of the medicines that I have for you are not really super effective. A lot of them are addictive, or they quit working after a while. So, to stumble across a product that is as effective as cannabis or CBD, with such a beautiful, very limited side effect profile, it's exciting. And the same thing with my anxiety patients. I mean, one thing I've always hated about depression and anxiety, and the way that we manage it, is that, it waxes and wanes. People don't wake up on Monday feeling the same way they feel on Tuesday or Friday. Most people feel worse on Sunday night, Monday morning than they do on Thursday night or Friday morning. And the way that we treat depression, we just give people bigger and bigger doses of antidepressants. If that doesn't work, we add a little antipsychotic, and then they're out of control. If they don't take that medicine, they're going to get, physically sick from the withdrawal. Mm-hmm. So they have to take the same dose every day, even if they're, overall feeling not as bad. The great thing about cannabis is that if you, have a better day, you can take some or none, and if you're having a worse day, you can take a lot more. You're so much more in control. The patient is totally empowered to take care of themselves, and I love that. Right.
Now, I mean, you've been working in this industry for a while now, especially for the Medicare side, right? So I guess I got a couple of questions for you. One was the stigma surrounding cannabis within the medical field. Obviously, the endocannabinoid system was just kind of like a recently new thing that people are learning about, and it seems like every day we're still finding out more and more information. We've talked to doctors before on the radio show about the education and the stigmas that you guys receive within the health community. Is it something that you're seeing the same issues, from 5 years ago, stigmas that, as of today, or are you starting to see a lot of doctors really, refocus themselves and stepping into learning about this?
Well, I think that doctors are more interested, and I think the studies support that. Doctors are more interested. They think there may be benefit to using some of these products. But they, by and large, it probably goes 70-30, that 70% of doctors across the board think there may be some benefit with these products. But 70% of them also do not feel comfortable talking about it with their patients. Any time you provide a sort of off-the-grid recommendation to your patient, you open yourself up for risk. So we still need to look for doctors that have decided to think about it, get trained about it, know how to know how to handle these products, and so that other doctors can refer. It makes sense. I mean, some doctors are really, really good at cancer, and other doctors know, urologic health and prostate health really, really well. So specializing this out and making sure that we have people who can help, within that specialty is going to be important as things move along.
Right. I mean, it's an amazing industry right now because things are changing so fast, and it seems like the doctors, the law enforcement. I mean, it's. I don't know if people are just still afraid of the stigma. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you think it's more generally acceptable now in the medical field, or is there still people that are just really against it?
I would say it's acceptable at all in the medical field. I mean, you're still looking at all of the pain clinics that that will fire you if you test positive for. Fire you as a patient if you test positive for a cannabinoid. You could or anything else in your system that they haven't prescribed for you. They'll terminate your relationship. So a lot of pain patients who would like to add cannabis really are not able to under the current climate. It's too bad. And, there's a lot of patients that when I was on the wedding and graduation party circuit this summer, I had somebody tap me on the shoulder 1,000,000 times to go and talk to their uncle or their friend who was driving to Colorado to get their cannabis and driving it all the way back to New York State. I mean, really completely illegal behavior to get products that, are working for them. And then I would go see this person, and you would never guess. This is a guy you would expect to see sitting on his riding lawnmower, mowing his lawn. I would never expect that this person is also, using cannabis. So I think there are individuals that are getting great results, but boy, I don't think that the stigma has gotten very far. Although the level of interest is definitely a bit higher as it goes. So I'm excited about I'm excited about an increased level of interest, and I think the more that we can do to educate people, the more we can normalize this and just make people aware of how it works and what kind of studies are available. There's loads of studies. People just don't have access to them or don't know how to find them. And so I think education is huge for the consumer and for the provider.
Right. I mean, it's great that you bring that up, actually, because, I just read a great article from, again, Dr. Bob, who was on the show before, about how, he's basically just PO'd. He's kind of upset because, he, like you just said, the tests are out there. The studies are out there. I mean, there's. And it's not like there's one or two. I mean, there's thousands of these tests out there. Why does the government keep saying that they need to do more testing? It's this whole Schedule 1 thing, which is another question I had. Was I seen a lot of these people talk about how if we took cannabis off Schedule 1, it would alleviate this vaping issue. I don't think that's true. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? Like, do you think that would be true if we could get this off a Schedule 1 into a Schedule 2 or 3 substance, that the vaping issue would be solved? I mean, I think there's a black market everywhere, until we set up regulations and testing and like a stricter FDA thing. But coming out of the food industry, this is why it shocks me, because, as you said, if you look at brown or white rice, the amount of toxins within white rice that's allowable to be served to my kids tonight, they're not putting a ban on that. You know what I mean?
Yes. Oh, I know. I mean, the amount of toxins allowable in the food industry. I think that cannabis should just be legalized and regulated everywhere. And then, although there is so much fallout from that, there are a lot of people that, rely on a secondary economy. There's whole neighborhoods where people have sold, cannabis illegally to support their family and to pay their rent, So if we legalize immediately, that there could be some really significant outcomes in some of these economies, and I worry about that. But we have to really think about the safety of our citizens first, and go ahead and regulate the industry, and then if it's legal and regulated, we're going to get better products. I mean, almost certainly you're going to have access to better products in a legalized, regulated market than if we're, relying on having to buy it off the street.
It's true.
Yeah, it is true. Look, Joe, there isn't one single case that we found in a vaping issue where these carts are coming from regulated dispensaries. They're not. Everything's coming off of the street, so that's a fact. Absolutely right.
But I think it's also, I think some of this vaping, I'm curious really about the consumer consumption pattern. I wonder how much they're using, and if this is just somebody, I have some, people I know who are vaping tobacco, and they are hitting that vape constantly. I know a college, a baseball player that I'm just really lucky to know through a friend. And we had dinner with him. All the kids used to chew tobacco, right, when you were a baseball player. Now they all vape, but these kids are vaping 4 cartridges a day. It's a massive quantity of exposure. And if those are flavored cartridges, they're almost certainly getting irreversible lung damage from that exposure.
Right.
So I really wonder about personal consumption patterns. I'm not sure I'm going to hang all of this risk on products obtained from a secondary market. I think a lot of it is that people are just really overusing these products. They've taken nicotine, which is so addictive, and gotten rid of all the negative stuff. You don't smell like an ashtray. You don't, it isn't a big cloud of smoke surrounding you all the time. It isn't messy, but now it also tastes like candy. This is horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
I kind of want to play devil's advocate. Okay, because I do use a lot of vape cartridges, because I'm a medical patient. So it's very interesting because you definitely have a very good point. And when I think about, you're like, wow, it's an overusage thing. These people are doing, almost 4 maybe grams within a day to a 2-day period. That tells me that the cartridges that they're receiving are definitely not of a high quality, because I could buy a gram cartridge from a reputable dispensary, and that cartridge will probably last an entire week.
Wow.
So you're absolutely right. The amount of carcinogens that the public is taking in by using a product that isn't regulated, because obviously, being a medical patient, all the products that I buy are third-party tested ridiculously because of the laws that are passed.
But that's only in Arizona, Brandon, right? Because we have.
Well, Arizona, California, Oregon, Nevada. Everybody has. They all have third-party testing rules and regulations. Everything is become extremely strict, obviously, because of what's happening in the market. Now, the regulated market is really tightening down. Everybody is looking at this. Colorado is looking at this extremely heavily because none of these reputable medical states that have been doing cannabis for that long they don't want this to get screwed up. I'll give you a perfect example. With Arizona, what a huge issue we had with concentrates being illegal by the federal and the state until there was a Supreme Court decision that's exactly what, patients needed, if you will. Okay? So if we go back to that issue and the progress that we've come to from there, they definitely don't want to revert at all.
No. Oh, man, I was just going to say one thing. Oh, yeah. The problem is within all this, and this is where I kind of point back to a little bit of federal oversight, which I know doesn't make a lot of people happy, especially when it comes to dispensaries. We have dispensaries here in Vermont, man, that do not third-party test their carts. We have one that does that, and they do a good job making their carts. Now, we also have one that is a dispensary that still claims to put glycol in their carts, and this is a dispensary that's serving patients in Vermont, and they openly admit using glycols, MCT oils. You know what I mean? These are things that, we were talking about even today with Dr. Mary about, how we're not supposed to have these fats in our lungs. How is this medicine? You know what I mean? And this is where I think we need more oversight, especially with dispensaries. I mean, in Colorado, the dispensary system is great, right? Like the OLCC's on top of it all. Not to say not to say it's a great business model now because of the recreational markets out there, but I mean, if there was a problem out in Colorado, they went and fixed it, right? If there was an issue in Colorado, they kind of went and fixed it, right? These issues that we have in other states, where we found dispensaries serving moldy products, glycols, processing. So, I mean, what's to say that dispensary in Vermont, right, that we reported on, processing moldy weed into, guess where that moldy weed went to? It went to a cart, right? This was months ago that we reported this, and it did get someone sick in Vermont, and that's a dispensary, right? So, again, this is where one of my funny questions, and we've always asked this question, Brandon, you know as well as I do. Where does the moldy weed go? It gets processed. It gets put into a cart, right? It's the
No,
why not?
Right.
You know what I mean? No one.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like, it's the same thing with the food industry. If the milk that comes in has too much, I mean, the allowable contaminants of milk are blood and pus. From if there's an infected udder, and if the blood or pus is too high, it goes into cheese industry. Rather than being served as a liquid milk.
Absolutely right.
Sure, the same thing is true. The same thing is true if you have crummy weed. It's probably getting pushed into the cart market. That's very interesting.
No, I mean and again,
you're absolutely right.
This report that I'm talking about, this issue I'm talking about, is a real issue. It happened in Vermont. We have and it went through a dispensary. The problem with the dispensaries in Vermont is they're unilateral systems where they self-test their own products. So that's where we get on top of the part of ethics, right? Like, I mean, as a medical professional, you're bound to do the best for your patients, right? And when you're a medical dispensary, and I'm not going to point any fingers at anybody, but I know a lot of them do that. But if you only offer carts and shatter, what are you offering for to your patients? You know what I mean? Like, out of those two products, very low cannabinoids. One is processed in with additives that they openly admit to have glycol and MCT oils, and why? And the other way, the whole process strips out all these cannabinoids, and they're using butane to process the shatter. You know what I mean? So, and these are all issues that we've seen issues for, and you as a patient go to your dispensary, and that's your option. That's where I think that more government oversight needs to be taken. And now, Doctor, you're in the medical profession, and this is where, I have a lot of conflict of interest, I guess, where everybody says, we want to pull it from the government. I still think, the medical industry has oversight, right? You guys have oversight. There's committees. There's all sorts of agencies, right? They're government funded. They make sure that, the same kind of practices and such happen in the East Coast happen on the West Coast, right? The vaccination thing, shots, flu shots, all these things. Everybody's practicing the same. They all come out of the same handbook. Now, does that mean they do it all the exact same way? No. Does that mean that somebody with cancer needs to fly to another state to get the doctor or the medication that they might need? Sure. But like in this world right now, it seems like everything's so far shattered. How do you feel about some oversight within the medical cannabis community? I mean, you're within the medical community now. Do you think there should be oversight, or should it just be left to the states to do themselves? And like, for instance, we're talking about right now with the dispensaries. Vermont's a unilateral dispensary. Brandon, goes out to Colorado. He can go to a dispensary and walk in and get the cart that's tested 8 different ways, and it's been third party tested. But here in Vermont, we don't have that comfortability.
Yeah. I mean, there's this state-to-state regulation is probably, I don't really see how this is benefiting anyone. It doesn't make any sense, and especially with how mobile people are. Like you say, you can go to, you can see how people are doing it right in other states and getting really great outcomes. Like, I mean, the California dispensaries, you can get a product, see what your terpene content is, see what your CBD and THC ratio is. That's just fantastic. I mean, you can really dial this in if you're using it either recreationally or medicinally, and get exactly the product you're looking for. I don't understand why that is being withheld from people all over the country, or, putting people in situations where they're, transporting product and, across lines or sending it in mail. I mean, I hear about all these things and just am wincing because, if the right person picks up on that, that can be a really serious problem for you and your family,
Right.
So, but I mean, like here in New York, we have a medical cannabis laws. You can get medical product, but it's all either vape or tincture or hard pressed tablets. We have no flower,
right.
And it's extremely expensive. So people just don't use it. A lot of people will get a medical card and then admit that they're getting the medical card to cover themselves from the stuff they're buying on a secondary market. I think that's ridiculous.
Right. Well, it definitely is.
I mean, ridiculous.
There's a lot of ridiculousness going on. Guys, we do have to take a quick break. It's 1 o'clock. We have to do the call. You are tuned into WGDR Plainfield, WGDH Hardwick. This is 91.1 FM and 91.7. You guys can live stream us anywhere in the world at www.wgdr.org. And again, you can also stream us from our new stream site, Stone Age Magazine. So if you guys want to check it out, stoneagemagazine.com. We are streaming there right now, live. So go check it out. Go show them some love. Guys, we are going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Sometimes you catch that funky breeze. You're in the weeds.
Hey, young America, we need to talk. You may think this is uncool. You may even think it is bogus. But I want to tell you about something that has everyone buzzing. Something that concerns mature boys and girls just like you. Something called grass. Not that grass. I'm talking about marijuana. You may have heard of it. You may have seen someone smoking it, like those burnout bohemians or that crazy-eyed custodian at your school. You may have taken a toke or two. But do you know the whole story? Do you know the blunt truth? Weed, grass, ganja, joint, doobie, do, chronic, ace, lobo, loco, love boat, bud, buddha, blunt, pot, pat, pin, chiba, 420, and hashish, or hash for short. No matter what you call it, no matter what hip street live it's referred to by, it all comes from the same stash. It's all marijuana. I know what you're thinking. What is marijuana? What makes marijuana so dangerous? Where can I get some marijuana? Well, brother, I'm not going to nickel and dime you. I'm not like the man all you kids are rebelling against. I'm hip. I know what young people are dealing with these days. In fact, here are some of my free-thinking friends to prove how completely not square I really am.
Parents are hypocrites. They tell us one thing, but then they do another. Why don't they practice what they preach?
Adults never have time to listen to us. And when they do, they just don't do what we're saying. Why can't we dress the way we want in school?
So what about grass? Let's start with the basics. Marijuana is a plant that grows best with plenty of water and sunlight. Its leaves extend outwards in a star pattern some say resembles a hand, an open palm reaching out to claim its next victim. Rolled in zigzags, or puffed from 7th period woodshop projects, the smoke from this plant causes a brief state of euphoria, immediately followed by permanent insanity. Users are prone to unpredictable behavior, including junk food binges, joyride, and a sudden urge to wear sunglasses at night.
Marijuana should be made legal. Now!
Plus, they look flat out crazy. You there! Stop laughing. Laughing is a symptom caused by blowing pot. Take a good look at yourself. Are you addicted? Are your eyes half shut and bloodshot? Do you recognize that person in the mirror? Then blame it all on marijuana. Long-term use of marijuana can lead to a psychological dependency. Soon, you'll be taking all sorts of measures to get your fix. People will start calling you names like pothead, or smoky McBong water. Losing all motivation, it's likely that you will drop out of school, take a sudden liking to sitar music, and maybe even get felt up by a cop or two. So why smoke grass?
I took it on a dare.
And if I dared you to jump off a cliff, would you do that too?
Man, everybody blows pot.
I know this one. Guy that doesn't. Wait, not that guy. This guy.
Oh, no, thank you. Not for me. For our pie, it enhances my creativity.
No, it doesn't. Look at these paintings. The artist was stoned when he painted these. Those don't look like real flowers. Is marijuana really where it's at? Is it really as righteous as you think? There is more to life than grass. There are fulfilling careers and groovy beach parties. The closer you look, the more seeds you find in your stash. Follow your hopes and dreams. Be someone. Do yourself and your country a favor. Don't let this happen to you.
All right, guys, and we are back. So that was a little bit of the old 70s PSA stuff that we used to hear a lot on the radio, which is remarkable because, you know, we're sitting here with Dr. Mary talking about stigmas, especially in the medical industry, right? And where we're at nowadays. So, Dr. Mary, we've been talking a lot about the vape crisis. You know, as we know, it's something that's going to have to be figured out here shortly. You know, there's a lot of light on it. There's a lot of issues with it. There's a lot of other issues in the world that, you know, people are dying from and everything else, which doesn't make the deaths any less important. But right now, guys, the biggest thing is to be safe, right? If you feel any sort of sickness, and I mean, especially in this time of year, because, you know, up here in the Northeast, it's, you know, we're coming into the fall season where it seems like everybody seems to be getting sick. And when we talk about, like, you know, the signs that Dr. Murray was bringing up earlier, you know, like coughing up some mucus and things like that, you know, a lot of these things can be generally conceived as a cold, right? So, but we want to make sure you guys stay healthy. Know the product that you put in your system. Know what you're doing with it. And if there's an alternative method, you know what I mean? Let's look at that for a little bit until we can figure out what's going on here nationally and more so globally. But like, it's like kind of like what Brandon said, like why are we not seeing these issues in a staggering amount in other countries, you know? But again,
well, I mean, hang on. I read one really good article recently. I'll definitely throw it up on our page. And basically it was a person who was looking at the two different markets in between the United States and Canada. And right now, Canada is not having any problems with vaping issues at all whatsoever. So, you know, it really kind of tips people off to look at something and really go, all right, so what's the deeper story with this? Like, now we've seen a lot of results. Okay, we have seen vitamin E acetate. We've seen a couple different forms of like a synthetic arsenic and whatnot. So it's very hard to kind of pinpoint, obviously, exactly what's going on, okay? Because the people in the black market that are making these cartridges are basically, you know, taking the THC oil and that distillate, and they're basically trying to stretch it as far as they can, which is why, really, I think we're having this issue more than anything else. Because of the things that they're cutting with it and because of the agents that they need in order to thin it out. Right. You know, the funny thing about all this, and you and I know this, Joe, is you had some really nice fresh pressed rosin, okay, and a very high end like ceramic type cartridge, okay. You could literally heat that up, okay, and you could winterize it, and it would become fluid enough that you would be able to vape it out of a cartridge without adding anything to it, okay? Now, obviously, if you're doing this with very holistic cannabis, okay, this is medical grade flower that you're literally running through a press, at a very low temperature and the whole 9 yards. I mean, I think that's about as safe as you can possibly get when it comes to this type of medical use.
Well, I think. Well, you said one thing that I think is very important that I want to discuss too. And if you ever go to a dab bar and you have a really good dab tender, you notice they never burn their nails, man. You know what I mean? It's about the right temperature. Right. It's about low temperature. A lot of these people are doing cold start dabs, which I absolutely love and think is the future. And that's where it should be. But a lot of these guys, you know, I've dabbed with guys that need, 1,000 degrees in their dab nail, and the minute your material hits the nail, it just turns into basically carbon, right? So like you're basically smoking this carbon, and a lot of times, and tell me if I'm wrong. I know this is very strain specific, but in general, when you go and you grab a cart and you smoke it, and you get feel like someone just took a sledgehammer and slammed you between the eyes, that's probably not a good cart. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, that's what everybody's looking for. We have a lot of issues with alcohol not being backed off of properly in a lot of these issues. You know what I mean? Where it almost seems to me like right now, hold on guys, I got a call coming in. It almost seems to me like right now that people are overlooking a lot of things where they don't want to spend the time to finish things properly. You know what I'm saying? Like they don't want to back off the alcohol.
I mean, let's go back for a second. I think you're absolutely right. People that are using a form of concentrate because it's a very high form of concentrate when they're vaping it from a cartridge, they're looking for that instant head change, okay? That's why they're actually using that product. The same thing could pretty much be said about someone that's consuming flower, okay? There's many different ways you could consume flower. You could simply just smoke a joint, or you could use a very high-powered water, apparatus in order to consume your flower. And obviously, you're going to be taking in way more out of that than you would be simply just smoking a joint, okay? Right. And the people that are doing that are doing it because they're looking for that instant head change, right? That's why people consume cannabis in a certain sense, especially from a medical standpoint. Like you said, being the strain of the week, basically in that same sense, the medical side of it is why these people are consuming this cannabis. So that's what they're looking for.
Now is it because we've gone from different processes now where everything's going through an extraction machine, which wasn't so prevalent years ago? That's another good question.
What's the big joke on oil, right? What does everybody call it now? I heard it a long time ago. Somebody was like, "Oh, you smoke shatter? That's hippie crack." That's what that is. And I'm like, what?
Right, yeah, because there's now all these new processes, and they require all these things. I just want to call a quick time out in the conversation because we only have a few minutes, guys. Timothy Fair from Vermont Cannabis Solutions, who usually joins us every week, is on the phone with us right now. I didn't know if we're going to have him on our show because he's in New York at a huge conference right now. So we have him for a few minutes. Let's get him on the phone real quick and talk a little bit of cannabis law with him right now.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, Tim. How are we doing?
The background noise. I'm literally in downtown Manhattan right now, so do forgive if there's any background here.
Hey, we talked about it last week. You told me you're going to this huge convention. Why don't you just tell everybody quickly what you're doing right now?
I'm at the International Cannabis Bar Association's Cannabis Law Institute. It is the premier event of the year. It is an opportunity for cannabis lawyers across the world to come together for 3 days of training, seminars, sessions, networking. Basically, we just heard from a panel of the regulatory boards of Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New York about the upcoming plans. It's just an incredible wealth of knowledge, all things cannabis law related.
Which is amazing, and congratulations to you and Andrew that are both down there attending today. I got a question for you. You're our leaf law guy. One of the articles that really caught me by surprise this last week was that the marijuana arrest has risen for the third straight year, and now it has outpaced all arrests for all violent crimes. Tim, why? What's going on here? Is it because people are more out in the open now about it? So, like, just the
More people smoke weed than commit violence, Joe. I mean, I think that's real clear. And unfortunately, law enforcement just can't give it up. And we could spend probably a lot of time talking about why that fact is, but the reality is that as we get closer and closer to normalization, as we get closer and closer to legalization, the old guard, old habits die hard. And, cannabis is one of the easiest things to get people for. They're not going to be violent. Very rarely is there any resistance. It's a easy, low-hanging fruit. And yes, I think you kind of did hit it as well. As normalization occurs, as more and more people become comfortable, they do become more open with it. Whereas it was something that was taboo and hidden, as we see it permeate our culture, as we see more and more states legalize, people think that it's a freedom they have. And unfortunately, in some places, it's still not.
Right, we discussed that a lot with various states being what you can do, especially in Vermont, because it's not as legal as you think it is, right?
No, especially not in Vermont. It's not nearly as legal as people think it is. And we're seeing more enforcement actions recently than I have seen in the last 3 years. So that is, a cause of some concern.
Yeah, and I've seen a couple really big reports and deals that happen with patients. I mean, it's they can't even leave the medical patient alone now, who has the right to use and to buy and provide and carry and all these things, and they're still getting harassed, wasting taxpayers' money because, of course, it's going to go to court and it's going to usually either get thrown out of court or. It's not going to get processed, right?
Well, in state court, that's true. In state court, I think we're seeing a lot more rationality when it comes to dealing with these types of cases. Right. Federal court's a very, very different story.
True.
If you're, and there is still federal indictments coming down for marijuana. It's happening every day. And that is something that is not so easily dealt with.
No, not at all. And then, which kills me because we're seeing Pennsylvania talk about having an open shipment kind of a state, kind of like Colorado, what they were talking about before. As long as you're open to ship and receive, we will ship and receive with you. But only to those states that are allowable.
Will never happen. I mean, there's, Oregon, was talking about this and everyone got all excited. It's all fine and dandy. It'll never happen.
Do you think
not until we see federal change, because the minute you cross that state line, you are now both in violation of federal law. You're also in violation of the Cole Memorandum priorities. And I imagine that the district, U.S. Attorney for the District of Pennsylvania, and I think there's a northern, eastern, and a western in Pennsylvania, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think either of them would be too keen on that. And I bet if they, the first time they tried to ship cannabis out of state, you're going to see a federal prosecution. I can almost guarantee that.
Oh yeah, I think they're just waiting for that.
District Oregon as well.
I mean, we're starting to see like huge, like just monumental bust all across the country in these towns and these areas where these guys are they're busting everybody, especially in a large scale. I don't think they're so concerned about the smallest scale now, but it seems like all these bigger guys, businesses, companies, are getting busted. One thing I want to ask you about, Tim, and this is one thing that's been holding up Vermont and a bunch of other states as far as legalization goes, is the roadside testing, right? Michigan just expanded their roadside drug testing. They've been doing a pilot program, and now they're going to use it for a year. They had 92 times where they pulled somebody over, and 74 of those were THC positive tests. So they ran 92 tests, 74 of them were positive. We talk about these testing. Is this something that's going to? Obviously, there's something that has to happen, right? Is this something that we're going to start to see other legal states start to back up, even if the numbers aren't that great? Like, what is?
Numbers are numbers. So you test positive for THC. In a criminal prosecution for impaired driving, that means absolutely nothing. You might as well take a person's, blood sugar levels. It just doesn't have any correlation to impairment. What you worry about is states just having knee-jerk reactions and say, trying to pass zero, tolerance, any amount of THC in your bloodstream, and you're considered impaired. Which is one of the most ludicrous things that a jurisdiction can come up with, but one that has been implemented in several states already, as well as Canada. It's not so much what the numbers look at. It's does it serve the purpose? Does it serve the purpose of protecting the public? Does it serve the purpose of protecting drivers? And the answer is no. It doesn't do anything. Saliva test, roadside test, any sort of testing, that's going to just simply be able to tell how many nanograms of THC are in your blood, that doesn't serve the purpose of protecting anybody or really doing anything. So it's kind of a waste of time. As far as Vermont, it's in S54. In order to get this thing signed by the governor and get our Cannabis Control Board established, it's going to need to be there. That's just a reality. I think they've done a good job making sure that it's not going to be done roadside, that it's going to be needing a warrant. And frankly, right now in Vermont, they can get a warrant and go draw your blood. So if they're going to get a warrant and take anything from you, I would much rather have a cheek swab done than a blood draw, personally.
Right. Now, I know you don't have a lot of time, and I know we talked about this before. I know what your answer is going to be, but I want to reiterate it. If I go into a restaurant tomorrow and I eat some bad chicken, right? I mean, I get sick. I have the right I have many rights in this situation where I can, sue the restaurant. I have insurance. I have all these things that can cover me, help me because I got food poison, right? I don't know if you know where I'm going with this, but what are our rights if you're one of these people that end up in the hospital from vaping, this vaping crisis we've been talking about all show? Are there any rights? Is there going to be ever a chance that, the certain company that are making these carts, there's multiple ones out there that are being triggered pretty hard, and everybody's pointing the finger at, which we won't bring up here. We did earlier, but I won't bring it up here again. But is there who's held accountable for any of this stuff, or is it just a lost cause at this point?
It's just a lost cause at this point. I mean, honestly, there's a couple of steps that need to happen. First, we need to figure out what is causing this. Now, we got a lot of ideas, and it's looking more and more like there isn't any one culprit, that it's a combination of adulterants, toxic chemicals being put into these vape carts. So the first step, and we've just been talking about this actually for about the last 2 hours of the conference, as you can imagine, pretty hot topic, is identifying what it is for certain, so we can start focusing on that. But the broader picture is this needs to be, this is a perfect argument and a shining example of why we need a taxed and regulated system across this country. Uniform, because there is no real recourse. Who do you go after? We don't know what is the cause.
Right.
So rather than trying to go after someone, we feel it's a lot better to just simply put in a consumer protection law, standardized testing, make this across the country, make sure that every vape cart that's sold is tested, that we know there's no vitamin E acetate, we know there's no toxic chemicals, we know there's nothing that's going to cause these horrific injuries. And it is getting bad, and this is a real wake-up call for the unregulated market. At
this point, for that to happen, though, because there's no obviously federal or national oversight now, every state would have to choose to adopt their own. Like Mass has now taken all the carts off the shelves. They're pulling stuff off, right?
Right, which is just a knee-jerk reaction by Charlie Baker, which is just all that's going to serve to do is push people who vape back into the black market, which is exactly where you're finding these adulterated cartridges.
Right.
Absolutely ridiculous.
The whole Mass thing was, especially with the way they've reacted to a lot of these other issues. You know what I mean? Like the CBD on the shelves and the food. Like they stood their ground. They kind of held fast when even Maine was pulling stuff off the shelves. And then we see this knee jerk reaction, like as you said. Now, I mean, you're sitting in.
Well, just to make sure, Massachusetts actually did ban CBD in all foods.
Yes.
Massachusetts tends to overreact quite a bit, unfortunately.
Now, you're with a bunch of lawyers, and like you said, this is the hot button topic. What's the general consensus on vaping and how to handle it moving forward?
Basically, like I said, the two components here are identification and understanding, so people don't freak out and panic and make broad sweeping changes like banning all vaping, which really does way more harm than good. Identification of what it is. And a push for a standardized system of regulation where we can avoid this happening. When during the bootlegging era, you think about the amount of people that were poisoned by bootleg gin and homemade alcohol. Dozens, hundreds of cases, thousands of cases. And that's a good parallel here. We don't see people dying from adulterated alcohol and bootleg booze anymore. Why is that? Because there's regulation, because there's oversight, because you can go into a store and you can purchase a bottle of Jack Daniels and you can be fairly confident it's not made with rubbing alcohol.
Right.
And that's, exactly what needs to happen with the cannabis industry as a whole. And we're seeing it in vapes right now, but the same thing would apply to edibles. The same thing would apply to medical program. The same thing would apply to flour. when we talk about some of the mold issues, some of the that could potentially really harm people. Granted, it's happening with vaping right now, but if anything, this just further illustrates and further reinforces the need for a tax and regulated system.
No, definitely. Now, I mean, and here I go again. I'm going to ask you this one more last time. I'll let you get going because I know it's 1:30. You have a meeting.
Yeah, I do got to run. Okay, one last question. What do we got?
Is this have to be something that should be federally oversighted or state oversighted?
You know, it's a good question. That's an excellent question. You leave it to the states, and you get a patchwork quilt of regulations. What I would honestly like to see is, like most of our society, a floor put on by the feds. This is a minimum amount that needs to be done, and then states having the option to increase, more stringent controls.
Mm.
So I think it needs to be kind of a hybrid of both federal and state action to really get the job done.
Awesome. Well, I guess that's it for what I have for you today, Tim. Thank you again for spending some time with me. I mean, it's a lot of information in a short period of time. And hopefully we answer some questions out there, guys. Again, huge thank you to Timothy Fair, Vermont Cannabis Solutions, who's having a great time in New York this weekend.
Brandon, Joe, thank you guys so much. And I tell you what, next week I'll give you guys a whole update on the Cannabis Law Institute, what we did, what we learned, and where we are moving forward, guys.
I appreciate that, Tim.
Rest of the show.
We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks, brother.
All right, guys, we are back. Dr. Mary, are you still there?
Yes, still here.
Sorry about that. Hopefully you appreciate the law information. We do, as you guys can tell, Timothy Fair, a slew of information, right? We love talking to him on every show. And the sad thing about this whole vape crisis, and this is where we get nails it right in the head, is, these people who died, there is no insurance. There is no recourse. There is nobody that they can go after at this point in time. It's an unregulated, illegal, technically, market out there, even if you're in a legal state. I don't even know what the stipulations would be if it was a dispensary product that they took. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, that is the day and age that we live in, where, until we get rescheduled, a lot of these things and a lot of these rights that you would have, against, even like I said, chicken. If I go to a restaurant, eat some chicken, get sick, I have rights. I can go sue a place. I can get them shut down almost, right? Mm-hmm. You almost own their restaurant by the end of the evening.
Definitely.
It's just the way it works here, which fathoms me, because you think with some of these deaths that are occurring right now, and as far as everything goes, as far as this morning went, 12 hours ago, our deaths are risen up to 18, and we have over 1,000 cases as it sits, right? And there's tons being investigated right now that probably weren't being thought of as that until recently. We've seen this current outbreak, right? So the CDC has been very diligent on letting us know what's going on, which is great. You know what I mean? And rather than hide it from everybody, they're being on the proactive, which maybe it's a little too proactive. But with this vape cart issue, and I was going to talk to Dr. Mary about this, but when we're talking about the people who we see vaping now, right? We're talking about the types of people we see vaping. The people I see vaping the most are our elders, our parents, our elders, the older people, the people that don't want to smoke or smell like smoke, or still have this weird stigma against smoking a flower. They'd rather put the vape cart in their mouth, and it doesn't taste the same. It's not as smelly, and you see a lot of these people are using these cartridges, especially for working hours, right? Because obviously now everybody can go out back and smoke a blunt, or take a bong rip, or do something like that. They have to get their medicine by another form that will last them throughout the day. Now, Dr. Mary, I wanted to give you some time today just because we haven't really talked much about you yet. It's been a lot about the vaping issues, what you've seen, what you know. But let everybody talk about you, because you are an amazing woman, and I want to give you a big congratulations, because, as the more and more research I did on you, the more and more I was like, wow, this woman's amazing. So, I mean,
Thank you.
Well, you have books out, right? You just came out with a book recently. So you definitely have some cool books out there. And, and your interest is, like we said earlier, it's about internal medicine, right? Like, foods, things of that, natural brain health and happiness in your life, stuff like that. So just take a few minutes, tell people who you are, what you've done. Let's talk about a couple of these books, and then where people can find you.
Well, thank you. I did, for many years, studied a vegan diet and how dieting and modifying your diet can really help you to get healed very quickly from all kinds of diseases. And I mean, I think vegan diet is great, but I think the removing of processed foods in your diet is a really critical part, especially the processed grains, a really critical part of getting healthy. But what I really love about diet or about cannabis and CBD is patient empowerment and innovation. I love things that really shift the paradigm of the way that we handle patients and the way that patients can take charge of their own health. You know, so I did the work in diet for a very long time, wrote a book, a companion cookbook. I ran a little coaching community to help people change their diet, but never really got that to take off at the level that I wanted it to, just because I don't think people want to go vegan. Right. A lot of times I don't think people want to do that. And then I experienced, you know, a couple of very important deaths. I mean, I take care of dying people all the time. An internist is basically a pediatrician for grown-ups. So my job has always been to take care of grown-up people. But and so people die a lot while I'm taking care of them, from cancer or heart disease, or, you know, people that are in their 80s or 90s that are just moving through their life cycle. And so I've managed a lot of hospice. But my brother died a few years ago, and shortly after my brother died, a good girlfriend died. And both of those deaths were significant enough that I was at the bedside for both of them and managing the medications and handling the process myself instead of working with a nurse. And I was just amazed at the difference between death with cannabis versus death without. Just not only on control of pain and nausea, but also the spirituality, you know, around the whole thing was so much better. And I thought at that time that it must be just a coincidence. So I did some research on it and realized that it wasn't a coincidence at all. And there's a ton of research available. So then I started to shoot video around the research, and now I've shot 100 videos, and then wrote the book with Dr. Tom O'Brien, you know, with contributions from Lou Steger here at the Apothecary Kitchen in Manhattan, and also from Annabelle Manalo, you know, really amazing scientists to help get this movement launched and to help people get the care that they need. So I'm really working just to normalize cannabis and CBD. The funny thing, like you guys talked about how, you know, the government keeps saying that we need more studies, we need safety data. I mean, we have a product here that has been used for 5,000 years, where people in, you know, Egypt and in ancient Chinese documents were using it for pain or nausea, or for, you know, what appears to be for pain or for abdominal conditions. You know, for 5,000 years, if this product was going to cause significantly negative outcomes, we would have seen it by now. And then the research, really good research on IQ, really good research on the development of acute psychosis after taking it, you know, losing your mind, having a psychological breakdown. All of that has really been disputed, and with good studies. And so my job is to present those studies and also to just give people the data they need to make a better choice, or to make a choice within CBD and cannabis that'll work for them.
Now, you're a consumer, correct?
Oh, I can't. No, I mean, I can use CBD within my licensing, but doctors aren't allowed to use cannabis.
Ah.
But I did use a ton of cannabis when I was a kid, for sure. And, you know, in high school, I always joke that I smoked my body weight in cannabis. But I, you know, it was sort of end of the road, up North Michigan product, you know, and I kind of took what I could get. And I had a lot of paranoia with it. I didn't really even recognize that there were a lot of different strains, but it definitely managed my anxiety significantly. And so I can see how it would be really beneficial, you know, for what I'm dealing with now. It's just not something that's possible in the medical community.
Mm-hmm. Now, is it something that you hope that would be?
Oh, well, sure. I mean, I would hope for legalization and for everybody to relax. I think there's so many more doctors that are impaired with the use of alcohol, especially, and doctors and other professionals that are getting a lot of really significantly negative health outcomes with that. I wish that this was something that doctors and other professionals could use without, any risk to their license.
Right. I mean, everything is every professional right now is running that risk, right? No matter what field you're in, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a serviceman for the United States, you know what I mean? Because, even if you still live and reside in a legal state, CBD will get you kicked out, right? You'll lose your careers. I mean, we've seen it a couple of times where people have been buying CBD, and again, it goes back to this reliable company thing, which unfortunately right now in this industry is very hard to find because, people are going and buying this bottle of CBD and they go and test for THC. You know what I mean? Because it was either an issue hot. We talk about a lot on the show how you can really manipulate a lot of these things where you can test early and grow late. You can take a little butt off the thing, dry it a little differently, send it in, get the numbers you want. You know what I mean? And it becomes that question again. It goes, where is all that hot hemp go? You know what I mean? It's not quite.
Oh, I think it's so important to identify a high integrity source for any product that you're going to use in this industry. I mean, there's a lot of money flowing in the industry now, and
right.
It's very important to find a high integrity source for your CBD or for your cannabis. I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, and sadly, we see reports about. I mean, and we've seen numerous reports on this, not just one, but where these companies are self-testing products, bring them to laboratories that would be like, for instance, the top 10 CBD products that are sold on Amazon. None of them have an ounce of CBD in them. In the top 10, you know what I mean? So, and when you're a nation that's like a nation that we are nowadays, right, where everybody's buying stuff offline, Amazon's quick and easy, and you see a pretty package, a name that sounds cool, it looks cool. What do? You buy it, right? 90% of the times, like we've seen in this cannabis industry, we joke around it a lot. If you see a really pretty package, that probably means the product's not very good because that's where they spent their money, right? Most of these people that are into the products don't care about how the package looks. They care about the medicinal value. They care about what's in it. They're getting their third-party testing. They're putting their testing right up in front of you. They're not trying to hide nothing from you. They're being transparent, which is what we need. I think sometimes part of the problem is some people are being transparent about half the stuff. You know what I mean? Because it's like now we're finding about vitamin E acetate, how that's an additive in all these carts. I've never seen vitamin E acetate ever listed on a cart box ever in my life. Whether it said none or it had, or I've never seen a test that ever said vitamin E acetate. Right now, MCR Labs in Massachusetts is testing for vitamin E acetates in all their tests now. Because, I mean, there are good people, there are bad people out there, right? So
yeah, well, and the vitamin C, apparently there's a couple of quality perceptions out there like this. When people are trying to see if their cart has product in it, they'll tip it upside down and the little bubble will move in it. And that vitamin E acetate, extends the amount of product in the cart and gives that bubble appearance, and also lightens the color. People perceive a darker color in the vape to be lower quality, when actually a darker color is higher quality. The people that are cutting their vape products with terps are getting a much darker colored vape, but that light color that you get from using vitamin E or propylene glycol or vegetable glycerin is perceived to be higher quality. And the other thing that people have to be retrained on is this big white plume of smoke. People who exhale this white plume think that that's high quality, and that's evidence that you've got high concentrations of these dangerous vehicles in your vape. So if that's happening, that's a vape you shouldn't get again either. But we have to just make sure that people know that. I think some of the most cutting-edge vape products are the ones where they're cutting it with terps, and you're getting your concentration of CBD or CBD and THC. And, I mean, the best way to thin out your CBD, right, is with THC. That appears to be the very best way to thin it. But if you're trying to get it to thin out with another product, if you're trying to make a pure CBD cartridge, just adding adding some terps will help to round out the experience for the user, and also, give you a really high quality cartridge that's not going to hurt you one bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's sad because, like we've all said, there's no guidelines. Anybody can put anything in it. We call it hot dog water in the industry, right? And like you brought up a very great point, Dr. Mary, about the bubble, right? Because, I remember a year ago when carts started first hit the market, everyone's like, "Oh, you got to test the bubble. Check out the bubble. Watch the bubble. Here's the bubble." And now it's just new products that just come in, and now the bubble's not the way to test things anymore. A lot of these companies, guys, are putting self-etching inside of the carts or self-etching the tubes inside. Everything's trying to be etched and done right. That way you can spot a fake cart. Because, a lot of these things are just packaging. The actual carts themselves can be the cheapest carts from China in the nicest box ever. You know what I mean? And we've seen some really good companies take a huge hit, like a TKO, like a those clean carts, you know what I mean? Carts where people really tried to do the best thing at first, and then, whether the company splits or packaging becomes accessible or there was never a company to begin with. It's hard to tell because it's not like you can go online to some of these companies and check them out. A lot of the information is not there. It may be there. It's probably mainly skewed in a lot of different ways. But again, try to find somebody that does the third-party testing. If vaping is what you still want to do and what you feel like you need to do, just look for good products. We like to say go to your local dispensaries and only trust dispensary products, but there has been one issue with a dispensary cart, and we've had issues with our dispensaries here in Vermont that most of us are aware of. That's not the same for every state because every law changes with what the dispensaries are required to do. Most of them, like Brandon said earlier, out west, they all do third-party testing, and they're happy to do third-party testing because they know that if they can prove that they have a good quality product, that they're going to get the money they want for it, and they're going to have a market for it. It's the
closest. Oh yeah, and those are the products that are literally selling out. Right. Because people know that they can trust them. You're absolutely right.
Like everything else, even when it comes to distillates that you buy, right? You can buy a Ford Escort quality distillate, or you can buy the Lamborghini quality distillate, and obviously price is going to be effective.
Absolutely.
So if you want a top quality cart people, and you find one for $20 for a 1 gram, that's probably the hot dog water we talk about. You got to think about things. Sometimes things are too good to be true. If you guys want to check out some great videos, Dr. Mary does have some great videos up on her website. Doctor, can you tell people how to find them?
Yeah, my whole vision here is to create, short videos that will help you have the data that you need to make good decisions. And they're all housed at cbdandcannabisinfo.com. I have at this point about 100 videos, and by Christmas, by the end of the year, we'll have 200 educational videos. I'm going to dive into various cannabinoids and probably feature some favorite products, and also think about opioids and management of depression and anxiety. I think there's a really exciting position for these products in management of the opioid crisis, but also in managing day-to-day anxiety and depression much better than we are now.
Yeah, I totally agree. Again, I want to give you a huge thank you for your commitment to the industry. We all know as a medical professional, like you said, it's not a very easy industry to be related to cannabis with, right? Because there's still tons of stigmas out there between doctors and things like that. And like you said, you're not allowed to consume. It's hard to do any sort of official testing and research until we get the schedule changed on cannabis. The cart thing, guys, again, we can't stress enough. Please go find some of Dr. Mary's videos. Hopefully, Dr. Mary, we'll start pumping a bunch of those onto our group page. So if you guys want to check out some more videos,
Well, I actually have a series of vaping videos also. I shared the link with you a little bit earlier, but the vaping video series is a 3-part. It's about 10 minutes. And about 10 minutes per video, so it's about 30 minutes of free video on how to what's going on with vaping. Oh, and I also wanted to remind you as you move forward, through this, if you're thinking about if you have a cough, is this vaping related? the people who had vape-related problems had increasing shortness of breath for between 30 to 60 days before they presented to their doctor or the emergency room. And during that time, almost 100% of them had other symptoms like fever or loss of appetite or just generally feeling very sick and fatigued. So it's more of a shortness of breath with associated fatigue or fever rather than a persistent cough. So if that starts to come up, make sure that you get seen quickly, and of course stop any of the vaping that you're doing.
All right. Like you said, guys, there's lots of different ways to get your products, get your medicine, things like that. This one way you might want to take a break from. Like, me and Brandon have hit on it. There's multiple options. There's live pressed rosins. There's bubble hash. There's people make pills. There's FECO out there that people process, especially if you are in one of those situations where you need a higher dosage and intake each time you take a dose. One last question before we go. We got to go in about 2 or 3 minutes here because we do have 2 segments we stacked up so we could continue this conversation. But how do you feel about like the dosing amounts? Like we look at California, I believe it's 10 milligrams per piece. And a lot of these times these patients are in need of something more than that. Do you think we should have a cap regulation for patients?
You mean like in terms of how much we would allow them to buy?
Well,
I'm not sure what your question is.
Well, pretty much, yeah. I mean, out in California, right, Brandon, you can only buy products in 10 milligram increments, right, or pieces.
Yeah,
you're not allowed to get like a 400 piece or 400 milligram cough drop, I guess you could say. They won't allow it. So for a patient that needs a lot more than, like, say, 100, 150 milligrams, they're eating 15 pieces of something. You know what I mean? Which makes it very awkward for everybody involved, I guess you could say.
Well, I think, limiting a patient's individual amount that they can purchase might make sense. I suppose you wouldn't want a patient. I guess really what you would be doing there was limiting their ability to resell on a secondary market, and that's probably a smart thing to do. I don't know if I really have an opinion about that. I mean, I guess, using these products medicinally is where I really understand how to help people, and making sure that they have the data that they need to do that. And I mean, really, in most cases, even a really heavy medicinal user is not going to, be going, at the concentrations that are being limited on the existing regulations, Right. So it probably makes sense to do some limitation to how much people can purchase. I don't see a problem with that.
Right. Well, guys, we do have to get going. I just shared the video series. We did put it on the group invite. I know Facebook has been messing with us all week. It's been a fun one there. Yeah, man. Yeah, we've been reported a lot. So the show's growing, the page is growing. So, guys, if you want to go check out the In the Weeds group page, I did put the link to the video series there. It's drmarymd.com is a tag you can find. drmaryclifton.com/vaping-tv is the link. It's there right at our page. You guys can go check it out. It's a great video series. I watched it, and we've been trying to share it for everybody, and we'll continue to share it for you guys, especially being that we're in this crisis. Right now, guys, we do have to get going off the show. I got 2 segments stacked, ready to go. We have Thomas Marcombe with the Grower's Guide of Vermont Grow Coaching. We also have Jessalyn Dolan of Vermont Cannabis Nurse Association with her health and wellness tip. Dr. Mary, thank you again. Hopefully we can touch base and continue this conversation more and more as time goes.
I'd be happy to come back anytime, guys.
Thank you, Dr. Mary. We'll talk soon. And then now, guys, I'm going to have to say goodbye for another week. This was great. Unfortunately, again, we got a couple of stacked segments because we wanted to get this vape conversation going. First off, we're going to start off again with Thomas Marcombe with his Grower's Guide.
This is Tom with Vermont Grow Coaching, and welcome to Grower's Guide, your weekly beginner-friendly cannabis tips and tricks, only on In the Weeds Prohibition Talk Radio, WGDR 91.1 FM and WGDH 91.7 FM, or online on Facebook and WGDR.org. Today we're going to talk about molasses and the benefits of this amazing supplement. We at Vermont Grow Coaching use it as a key component in all of our organic grows. Molasses, for our purposes, is normally made from sugarcane. The sugar is boiled down to a dark syrup-like consistency. The crystallized sugars are then removed, leaving you with molasses. Although you can make your own molasses at home, we recommend purchasing an organic, unsulfured blackstrap molasses. Even if you can find molasses cheaper, we don't recommend straying from organic. Unfortunately, many molasses brands include preservatives and additives like sulfur dioxide, which can be detrimental to your organic ecosystem. So why blackstrap? The definition of blackstrap molasses is a molasses that has been boiled down and refined to the point of a dark brown, almost black color. Refining molasses to this point will allow the vitamins and nutrients in the molasses to be the most concentrated. Some of the benefits of the molasses include calcium, magnesium, potassium, and even iron. What's better? Not only does molasses provide necessary nutrients to your plants, but it also improves soil structure and feeds the beneficial microorganisms in your soil. It even acts as a deterrent for unwanted pests. Now, there are many ways you can add molasses to your grows. You can use it as a foliage spray. You can mix it with water, like you would a commercial nutrient, and water the soil directly. Or, and this is the preferred method for Vermont Grow Coaching, you can use molasses in a compost tea. There are many different teas you can make incorporating molasses, depending on your end goals. Here's an easy tea even the most novice of growers can handle. In a 5-gallon bucket, combine 4 gallons of water, 5 tablespoons of molasses, 1 cup of earthworm castings, and a 1/4 cup of your favorite animal compost. If you'd like, you can purchase large mesh tea bags for the compost and the castings. However, at Vermont Grow Coaching, we prefer to allow the sediment to be watered into the soil with the rest of the tea. Now toss in an air stone to keep everything moving and aerated. Allow that compost tea to brew for about 24 to 48 hours. Once the tea has brewed, it can be used to water your soil directly. See? Super simple. Now you know exactly why we at Vermont Grow Coaching consider molasses to be a powerhouse in the garden. We hope you enjoyed this segment of Grower's Guide. You know the importance of molasses now, and should be throwing on some shoes to head out the door to go get some. If you have any questions about today's segment or want to set up a consultation appointment, please feel free to reach out to Vermont Grow Coaching at vermontgrowcoach.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram, or contact us directly at 802-342-5381.
Hi, this is Jessie Lynn Dolan, cannabis nurse researcher, educator, and consultant, an organic cannabis and hemp farmer with Nurse Grown Organics, Vermont Hemp and CBD. I founded the Vermont Cannabis Nurses Association and am bringing you a weekly dose of whole plant to whole person medicine and healing tips. This week's tip comes from Cameron Keep, a cannabis nurse educator, aromatherapist, and herbalist specializing in oncology medicine and cannabis medicine from Boise, Idaho. Aromatherapy is one of the fastest growing, most popular complementary alternative therapies. It's the use of aromatic essential oils for physical and emotional health and well-being. We often underestimate aromas and our sense of smell and the role it plays in our health. Using aromatherapy can be a powerful way to enhance our well-being and further connect us with nature. Hopefully this brief overview inspires you to learn more about various ways you can use aromatherapy in your cannabis consumption and in your daily life. Essential oils are highly concentrated extracts obtained from various parts of a botanical plant, including the seeds, flowers, roots, and berries. Essential oils can be up to 100 times more concentrated than traditional herbal extracts, so it's important to remember that less is more when working with essential oils, and often cannabis as well. Some of you may have heard of terpenes. Terpenes is a term commonly used in the cannabis industry that refers to the individual aromatic molecules found in the cannabis plant. There are over 200 terpenes in cannabis. Terpenes are what give plants their distinct aroma or fragrance. Along with the many other plant compounds, they also contribute to the therapeutic benefit and entourage effect of cannabis. The terpene linalool in cannabis has been shown to help with anxiety. Linalool is found in lavender and also known to help anxiety. Kosher Kush and Do-Si-Do cannabis chemovars are high in linalool, as well as Skittles, which I'll be harvesting myself very soon.
You're listening to WGDR Plainfield, WGDH Hardwick, Goddard College Community Radio.